want to continue the discussion that we started with the two videos that I posted, first on memberships and then onto the main channel, about the 3-person case study. Just to recap, the first one was my very close friend and mentor who was from a hedge fund family and ended up being very idealistic and then turned evil. And then the second one was the first love of my life, who was also from a billionaire family and started off good and turned evil. And then the third one was my woman best friend who started off good and continued to compound that goodness in her life despite being very successful. And so first we covered the musings on the idea of self-love. And then we, in the second video, covered into that 3-part framework about agency, self-love, and then having an anchor point. In today's video, we're going to take this one step further in the analysis, where I want to talk about why is it that highly successful people do not prioritize romantic love. This is an observed phenomenon that I noticed not only in my life, but in the 3 people that I described, and also just in general when I analyze my peers or my mentors who are highly successful. They all have this shared behavior where they do not care for romantic love. Meaning that it's not necessarily that they won't be in romantic relationships or that they won't pursue romantic things or that they won't engage in things like sex and love, but rather that it's not something that they really see as integral to their self-identity. And so a lot of these, and it differs for men and women. What I noticed in highly successful men is that the romantic relationship is seen more as like a status symbol or like a milestone that they hit because it's something that they like kind of have to do. Like they will get married because they have to get married. They will have children because they have to have children. But it's not that they ever wanted to be like a family man or they actually genuinely believe that their wife is the love of their life. Like none of these things I observed actually mattered to these men. For women, highly successful women, I noticed that they would either just completely not engage at all, like they will just not date men, they will not pursue marriage and children, or they will, but it'll be used very strategically. So they would, similar to how the highly successful men operate, the highly successful women, they will utilize their partnership with the man for their self-advancement. So usually this manifests in going for very wealthy men, going for men that have a lot of status and power so that they can leverage that man's power, connections, and money to further themselves. And so that leads into point number 1 that I want to discuss, which is that highly agentic people are more inclined to be self-centered. So what do we mean by highly agentic? In the last video, we really broke down this idea that being agentic is more of a personality trait than a given freedom. So agency, or an agentic personality, is defined as the ability to have a will and to manifest your will. So the ability to think critically, to make decisions on your own, to be proactive in how you want to manifest your decision making. And then the outcome is usually highly agentic people are also very successful. When I say the word successful, I'm talking about the ability to set a goal and to actualize that goal. So I don't mean necessarily successful as in they have the most amount of money or they have the highest credentials, although it tends to fall that way. But what I mean is that the highly agentic person is able to have an independent free thought, and then they're able to project that free thought onto themselves and others, and they are able to live their lives in a way where they can actualize that vision or that belief or goal. So the reason why that this matters is because highly agentic people are naturally self-centered people. This is really important, okay? I know what I'm saying may sound very kind of like obvious or very simple at first, like duh, but I want us to really like sit and internalize that, because this in my later points, we're going to cover has dire consequences for society. Because when you are self-centered, so let's think about that. What does it mean to be self-centered? When you are self-centered, you believe three things. First, that you are important, that your being, your identity, your beliefs and values they have meaning, they have weight to it. The second is that you believe that you are in control of your life. So you have this sense where you believe that you have agency and sovereignty over your destiny. So you don't see your life as accumulation of just things that are happening to you. You instead view life as happening through you. The third one is that people who think of themselves, or people who are self-centered, they believe that to some degree, they have the right to live the life that they want to live, regardless of what others think. This is very important, okay? So when you put these three parts together, you can categorize self-centeredness in two parts. There's ordered self-centeredness, which is directly tied to self-love, and then there is corrupted self-centeredness. So, for example, if someone has a very strong sense of self, they're like, okay, I know who I am, I know my core identity, I know the values and beliefs that I want to commit to, and I have the discipline, drive, and dedication to implement that will, right? If you don't believe that your will has weight, meaning that you can just think it, but if you don't actually think that it matters, then that will is not going to be executed. Likewise, someone may think that they are important. Someone may think that their will is necessary for society, but they may not have the other aspects of that three-part framework I talked about, the agency, the self-love, and the anchor point, to actually manifest that into reality. So a lot of people I've noticed who are very self-centered, they either fall into extreme narcissism, where they are just so delusional in their sense of self. They believe that they are so much more grandiose, so much more important, and their life outcome does not actually reflect that importance. For example, I know a lot of people who think that they're a lot smarter than they really are. I know people who think to themselves, I am a very, very intelligent person. I'm so much smarter than everyone else. I know so much more than everyone else. And then you actually look at the outcome of their life, like their ability to have manifested that, right? If they claim to be that much superior in intellect to others, you'll notice that their outcome does not match that. So that's a form of self-centeredness that is more on the narcissistic side. Another aspect of narcissism that is corrupted self-centeredness is that they seek to then try to exploit and abuse others for their self-advancement. So people who are narcissistic are people who believe that they have that because their sense of self is so much more important than others, they don't value they don't value other people, and so they don't feel guilty when they abuse those other people. So, for example, narcissistic partners will extract and exploit as much labor from their partner as possible without any sense of guilt, right? They will cheat on their partners. They will make their partners work for them. They will make their partners do all this, and they won't feel a sense of like remorse or like, oh, okay, like, are my actions impacting others? So that's all like corrupted self-centeredness. Pure self-centeredness is coming from a place of self-love. And as we talked about in the previous video, you cannot have a sense of self-love without a connection to God. And again, I don't mean God in the institutionalized religion sense. I mean it in the sense of that there are governing goods and governing evil. So you can think of God as the amalgamation of good, and you can think of the devil or Satan as the amalgamation of evil. So you can really just label it as good versus evil. If you do not have a very strong connection to a universal good, the sense of goodness, of principles that we can all identify as good things, then you cannot have a sense of self-love, because because love is a universal good, right? We know that love expressed in any civilization manifests the same way, whether that's romantic love, familial love, platonic love, communal love, right? It's all, we all recognize it, we all know that that's love. So you can't identify the love that you have for yourself if you do not understand these other types of love, these greater universal goods, right? Self-centeredness is the same way. A pure self-centeredness is someone who understands that their life has value, that their life has meaning and purpose, and that they are here on this earth to do something that is unique to them, that other people could not necessarily manifest, right? And that doesn't mean that you are uniquely special in the sense that no one can do what you're doing, but that you are here able to do something that other people may not be able to do in their own domain, right? So we call these talents and gifts. When you have a gift for something, a particular interest, a particular inclination for something, a talent, a skill that you know that you are marginally better at than other people, that is a form of the manifestation of this self-centeredness that is pure, right? So what happens is that point two is that the self-centered individual will most likely follow a path of solitude. So solitude is basically like being alone, right? It's the sense that you are your own being, and it's kind of like you are living in a world of other people, but that you are experiencing your life through your own lens, and that own lens is the most important lens. So solitude is not necessarily physically being alone. Like there is that aspect as well, right? Where you are actually isolated socially. But when I use the word solitude, I'm talking about your sense of self is isolated from others. So also, sorry, I'm still kind of sick right now, so my voice is like giving up. So hopefully I can get this recorded out before my voice gives out. But what I mean is that, okay, so I'm Carla Kim. Carla Kim has a perception of herself. I have certain values and beliefs that I know to be true. I have a perception of myself that I know to be true. For example, I know that I am intelligent. I know that I am a woman. I know that I am of East Asian descent, right? These are core aspects of my identity that I know, right? I know that I have good character. I know that, like, these are things that I don't, if challenged, I'm not gonna be like, what? You know, it's kind of like your name. Like if someone were to come up to you and say to me, Sally, I'd be like, no, my name is Carla. And if they kept calling me Sally, I'd be like, no, my name is Carla. Like I know this for a fact, right? My name is Carla. Like it's not Sally, right? So there are certain things that we know to be very true to our core identity that if challenged does not shake us because we are so committed to that identity. When I am perceiving myself and navigating a world where there are other people who also have a sense of themselves, I have to essentially learn how to either separate or integrate myself with their sense of self. I apologize if this is getting confusing. So, for example, all of us know that we live in a society that relies on other people, right? That there is no such thing as a truly one person show, right? Like, for example, I'm sitting in this apartment in Seoul right now for 3 months. There are people who had to make the floor. There are people who had to make this couch. There are people who had to make the lights, right? So even though I am living and perceiving my reality in a world where I am thinking about myself, the environment that I live in was able to manifest because of the contributions of other people. And so we know on a conscious level that we are part of a greater collective, that there's a greater society that we are a part of. But this is where the solitude aspect begins to change that dynamic, is that highly agentic, self-centered people, they view themselves as almost like detached from that collective, meaning that they recognize that indeed I am in the collective, indeed I benefit from the contributions of others, but it doesn't matter to them. So this is where it goes into point 3. Why this has, when it's in the hands of the ultra wealthy elites, it has magnitudes of dire consequences for society. Is that when you look at that case study of the 3 people, 3 individuals, where 2 of them turned evil, those 2 men, one of the reasons among many that they turned evil is because they have such a strong sense of self, right? And they're so self-centered, but their anchor point did not come from a place where they understood universal good and evil. And so they recognized correctly that they are indeed a highly agentic being. And they are self-aware to know, okay, I know who I am, I know the vision that I have for others, and I know how I'm going to manifest it. But where they derail is that in that path of solitude, where they realize that their sense of self is removed from the greater collective of other humans, somewhere in that process, they grew a disdain for others. So I will give you one example. The first guy, he was very politically on fire for increasing human rights. He was very on fire for women's rights. He would tell me all the time that the subjugation of women is one of the greatest evils that has occurred, and that as a man who was born into a family with a lot of power and privilege, he was going to use that privilege to further the advancements of women around the world, right? So this is a man who he knows, so if you think about that process I talked about, he knew in his head, I have an independent thought. And that independent thought is that I analyze the world around me and I noticed a phenomenon where women have been subjugated throughout history by men. So he correctly identified the evil. The second thing is that he thought to himself, my thoughts matter. Like, my assessment that women are being subjugated by men is evil, that assessment matters. That what I think matters, what I think has an impact on others. So he was able to get through that phase. And then the third phase is that he was then able to say, okay, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to use my agency to go and manifest a vision of the world where men and women are living in harmony with each other, right? That was his original thought. As he went through the journey of solitude, because he did not have an anchor point to God, to goodness, to universal oneness of the human collective, it devolved now into disdain for others. So going back to that politics example, when there was an instance of when the election of Trump versus Hillary Clinton happened, I could tell that this really fractured his belief in the world, because he was very, very on fire for women's rights. And when Hillary Clinton became the first woman presidential nominee to actually get on the ticket to go up against the other party. So we've had women who have tried to run for certain offices, right? Like I think like Sarah Palin, for example, was the VP nominee for John McCain, I think, right? But Hillary Clinton was the first example where it was literally like we could have had the first ever U.S. woman president, right? So this was a major, major, major turning point in the needle, moving the needle of humanity. When Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but lost because of the Electoral College to Donald Trump, I could tell that something in his mind, it fractured. Like there was something that it broke. Because when I spoke to him next, he was speaking very deeply about how troubled he was that 70 million or so Americans voted for Trump. And he was saying, how could someone who is so obviously evil, an ultra-wealthy elite billionaire like Trump, who is so obviously for his own kind, he doesn't even try to hide the fact that he just doesn't care about the average American. How was he able to win the hearts of so many Americans, including women, when you had a woman candidate who had certain values that promised a more egalitarian society for men and women. And my answer to him, and a personal failure of mine, is that at that time I was like 19 or 20. No, sorry, I was younger. I was 17 or 18. I did not have the discernment and wisdom that I had today. And so I wasn't able to give the type of counsel that I'm able to give today. And so my response to him at that time was that I basically said, I think people are stupid. I said, I think that people, when they are given the choice to choose good or evil, they will choose the evil that aligns with their purposes. So if a certain demographic of Americans feel that their country has been overrun by immigrants, by brown and black folks, or Asian folks, by people who are not white, they will happily sacrifice their own well-being, such as in economics, their own socioeconomic well-being, if it means that they can align themselves with the evil that they like to see happen, which is racism. So I was saying that we can reduce some of the demographic of people who voted for Trump as racist and sexist. And so I told him that people are not like you and me, where we actually sit and ponder and think and question the evils of the world. People are not doing that. That's what I told him. That was my answer to him. Looking back, I severely regret saying that to him, because from that moment, I could tell things began to move in his head. It began to click. And that idealism that he had for the world became corrupted. Because now what him and I have done is that we have introduced disdain for others. We have basically said that our moral and intellectual superiority is so great that other people simply cannot understand it, was basically our thesis at the time. It is in the last video, I talked about epistemic humility and epistemic arrogance. We were experiencing epistemic arrogance because we were youngins, we were like, lower, we were like freshmen, sophomores in college at these elite universities. We thought we were going to change the world. We all thought we were big shots. We all thought we were, the shit. And so because we lacked the maturity to actually go through the journey of solitude in a pure manner, we developed a sense of, I'm better than other people. And so when I gave that counsel, when I gave that insight to him, I could tell from that point on, and I'm not saying that I'm the only one that caused this, right? I'm sure he was already thinking about these things before we had that discussion. But I could tell that for him, his perception of the world, it was never the same after that. Because he must have thought in his mind, okay, I cannot trust that the majority of humans know what's best for them. I cannot trust that the majority of humans have a high level of commitment to truth, conscious, and good values. And so in that moment of disdain, you get corrupted solitude, which is the separation of self from others. It's the idea that I am me and I no longer need to be responsible for the contributions and betterment of the world that I live in, my impact to others. Instead, I'm gonna do me, and what I think needs to be done will need to get done, and it doesn't matter if it's forced onto others. So as you go through that type of psychology, you will spiral into more and more corrupt ways of thinking, and you get to the final manifestation, which is what I am seeing play out today, and I've been seeing it play out for years, which is that they then do a full circle mental gymnastic back to evil. So if they started off good, they then start to devolve more and more and more into mental gymnastics, where they tell themselves, okay, I have a unique burden to then lead humanity. I have a unique burden to lead enterprises, to manage the flow of money in markets, to do these things. And then as they keep removing themselves from others and the people that they are governing, they end up being in this like narcissistic, self-centered, but highly agentic bubble, and those people rise to the top. And so when you look at the people who are the most successful in our society, the people who have the most consolidation of power, they are all very highly agentic, highly self-centered, and extremely disdainful of others. They operate on the premise of exclusivity. Okay? This is everyone, right? Just think about how much the people at the top do not want to be associated with people that are in the middle and bottom, right? We see the evidence of this everywhere. Go on a plane. What do you have? You have first class, business class, economy class, right? You have the elites, they don't even want to sit in the same area as a commoner on a plane that is essentially like a pressurized metal tube flying through the sky at thousands of miles per hour. Like, even in a hyper situation where if a plane were to crash, everyone would die regardless of how rich they are. Rich people still said, nah, F that, I want to be in my own little perfect bubble at the front of the plane where I get to have a comfy seat and I get to lay down and recline while everyone else gets the crappy seats in the back, right? Like, we see the evidence of this. This is what I'm talking about, this separation of self from others. It started off with the corrupt solitude. The corrupt solitary path. And so, same thing for celebrities. Celebrities do not see themselves as part of the collective. That is why they're celebrities. They are inherently exclusive. Same thing for ultra wealthy elites. They don't send their kids to the same schools, the same parks, the same third party spaces, the same school. They don't do any of that. They don't take public transit. They have private drivers. Everything that ultra wealthy elites do is premised on the idea that they need to be separate from others. And that separation from others is what is ruining our world, because if the people who have the consolidation of power, who have the agency to move the needle, are the ones who hate humanity, they don't want to be a part of other people, they don't want to see themselves as one of us, of all of humanity, of course you're going to see all the manifestations of evil. Of course you're going to see rising wealth inequality. Of course you're going to see dysfunction between men and women. Of course you're going to see nationalism, racism, all of the isms and obes, the evils of the world. Like, of course you're going to see the manifestation of that, because the people who hold the power are self-centered, highly agentic. They have low anchor points, meaning that they don't have a commitment to good, and they have all sorts of varying degrees of evil pathologies that are governing their mind, and they're the ones that are going to move the needle. And so, to make a long story short, because we're at 28 minutes now, what do we do about this? We need to get more people to be agentic. We need to get more people to be highly agentic. We need people who are highly independent thinkers. We need people who are willing to take the commitment, the journey on self-discovery, truth, consciousness, God, goodness. And then we need those people to actually know how to manifest their will so that collectively, when enough people do it, they can move the needle. One of the biggest problems that the reason why every major progressive movement in humanity eventually goes to crap, as we are witnessing in America today, is because the people who would benefit from that progress are not the ones that are moving the needle. Okay? For example, let's take feminism. Feminism started by who? Rich white women in Europe. Okay, that was the beginning of the 1800s feminism. It was rich white women. As we go through first, second, third, and fourth wave feminism, there was an entire wave of feminism halfway through where the white women said, you know what? I'm not dealing with black women. I don't want to be associated with other types of women because I'm what? I'm an elite. So when you think about anything that tries to move the needle for progress, such as feminism, you're going to see these manifestations of corruption in it because the people that would benefit from, let's say, a more equal world where men and women are living in harmony, the people who are pushing for that movement are the people who benefit from a system that is corrupt and evil. It's not so, same thing with economic inequality. Who were the people that pushed for more wealth redistribution? Social Security, for example, Medicare, Medicaid, these things that said, you know what, let's collectively pool our money together via the government and then distribute it out to people so that they can have a good quality of life, so that they can retire at age like 65 or something and not worry about how they're going to eat, right? There was a period in America when the taxes on the wealthy was almost, I think, at like 80 or 90%. I'm going to make a separate video on this because I need to fact check myself and really research this. But I remember from my economics classes that there was a period in American history when the tax rates on corporations and the ultra wealthy elite was so astronomically high. And it just so happened that that tended to be the part when America was the most prosperous for the most amount of people. But who pushed for that legislation? The other elites. So what's happening when we look at this case study of the three people, all three of those individuals I spoke in this 3-part series were all elites. They're all elite people. They're all privileged people. So they're privileged because they're highly agentic. That's how they maintain their privilege. And they're highly self-centered. So they advance themselves. And when they advance themselves, they put themselves in a position that allows them to move more of their will onto others. So that's why major progressive movements don't happen, that they don't last, because the people who should be moving the needle should be the masses. It should be the majority. It should be coming from the people who are suffering from that evil. But instead, what's happening is that you have these highly agentic, highly self-centered, highly privileged elites who are going down all sorts of various spirals of being a superhero or a supervillain, or deluding themselves that they're good people or deluding themselves that they're bad people. It doesn't matter, right? There's a whole spectrum of elites. They are the ones that are enacting. They're making the laws. They're moving the money in the capital markets. They're creating these school curriculums. They're teaching all of the lectures in classes. Like, that's the problem. So that's what we need to solve on this channel. If we are going to be professional haters of evil but optimistic thinkers for good, how do we get the significant majority of people to start developing the traits that these elites have in the 3-person case study? Where how do I foster highly agentic personalities in people? That's what I'm trying to figure out. That's my next puzzle question. The reason why I have derailed on my channel, because I was trying to teach people about wealth inequality, trying to teach people about the wealth operating system, trying to teach people about the 5 great evils that I talk about on my channel. They're in the description in my channel bio. I came to the realization that it doesn't matter how much I educate people on what is going on if they're not going to utilize their agency, if they're not going to act, if they're not going to think critically. If, like, I should not be having to tell you that your life is going to go downhill if you don't take action against evil, powerful elites. Like that, I should not be having to tell you that. You should be already coming to that conclusion independently. And if you have, that's great. But unfortunately, many people are not coming to that conclusion. They're not coming to that thought process. And so I can record 10 million videos trying to educate people on what is happening, and that is important, and I will do that. but it's not going to move the needle, because knowledge without application is useless. Knowledge without application just sits here. We need what's sitting here. Well, let me take a step back. First of all, we need this to develop. And then after this is developed, we need people to have the agency, the highly agentic personality that the elites have, to then manifest whatever is in here into the real world, onto themselves and onto others. So it's like, how do I even begin to try to solve this problem of agency? Because the other problem is that a lot of people are not able to utilize their agency because of those governing systems, because of those evil systems. The reason why each of those three individuals that I outlined in my 3-person case study were able to actualize into the fullness of who they are, whether they chose a good or an evil life path, it doesn't matter. They were able to manifest their goals in life, is because they were in an environment that allowed them to explore who they are. For a lot of people who don't have such privileges, they're living on survival mode. They're not thinking of how to, they're not, like, a lot of people are not pondering the things that I ponder on my channel. A lot of people don't have the time to muse about the things that this video is talking about. Like, who has that time? People have bills to pay, they have kids to feed, they have their own selves, they have debt to pay off. Like, people are working, they're busy, they're thinking about survival. And so that, the reason why wealth inequality is the greatest evil out of the 5 that I talk about is because this environment where it forces the majority of people to live on survival mode, it inhibits that person's ability to develop their agentic personality. And so when I tell people these things that I'm talking about, do you know who understands me the most? Other elites. When I talk, I did this experiment in real time. I went back to my hometown in Kansas and I started talking to a few people. I would talk to people who would do my hair. I would talk to people who did my beauty treatments, like my nails and stuff, or I would talk to people at the church. I would tell them these things that I talk about. It's not clicking. They're not understanding what I'm saying. When I go to the people who are actively perpetuating a system of evil that benefits them, and I explain to them why that thing is evil, they get it. But they don't care. They get it, but they're like, yeah, but also I don't really care, because they're self-centered. So it's like, do you see the catch-22? Do you see the problem? How do we get the people who will benefit the most from the change in the system to take on that initiative and to actually manifest that progress and that change against the people who are suppressing them? How do we get that? That's what I'm trying to figure out. And I've been thinking about this for a very, very long time. And that leads into my final point, because this is becoming a very long video, which is essentially the bet that was made. So one of the people in the 3-person case study made a bet with me back in 2021. And they told me that they think that I am delusionally optimistic, that I have not come to the same conclusions that they have realized, which is what this video is talking about, right? That they have this disdain for humanity. And that they believe that there's no way to change the world unless you utilize the evil systems that the world is already in. Meaning that they think that the end justifies the means. That if the end outcome is better for humanity by their standard, which it usually isn't, then it's okay how you get there. If how you get there is evil, it's okay because the outcome is still marginally good. And so I told them that is simply not the case. That is not true. That is a limiting belief, because evil perpetuates more evil. See, the way that evil operates is that, think of it as like an airborne virus. It's a virus that is like it permeates through the air and it affects anything that it touches. So just like how if you get sick, viruses evolve over time, right? Like if you get sick, you might get like the physical manifestation of that virus, and then over time you'll start to see like new diseases appear, right? That's how evil operates. Evil doesn't just start off in one category. It jumps and it infects and it spreads to other facets of human society. And it transmutes into new forms of evil. So what you're going to see if you map out the progress of humanity is that the evil, it started off here, and then over time, it's like new branches of evil begin to occur. So if you think about like war, if war started off between tribal conflicts, between smaller groups of people who are fighting for resources, we now get to today's system, such as Palantir, which is creating AI drones to do facial recognition to target someone so that they can so they can go and basically blow that person's head off. I'll link, if you guys just Google Palantir drone attack, you're gonna see what I'm talking about. Like, they developed this technology already. So do you see how it's the evil, which was, let's say, violence for resource competition, it has now transmuted into a new type of evil that we can't even, like, people of yesteryear could not fathom was possible. So if you use evil to try to enact good on society, you're gonna just get more evil and you're gonna get new types of evil. And so I told him that cannot be the case, that your philosophy is wrong. And he told me, give me an example, prove to me an example where that was not the case. Where that the collective good in people can outdo the collective evil in people. And he told me, you will not find an example that lasts. You'll find pockets of that example happen throughout history, but you won't find something that lasts. And honestly, I'm speechless. I'm at a loss for words because that happened in 2021, and I told him, no, I'm going to prove to you that's not the case. And I have not been able to find the solution. One of the things that I put on my channel, that anti-business business, that was one of the ways that I was trying to think and figure out a way to do collective good. That we can alter economic systems without having to use evil methods. That people can choose of their own free will to distribute profits of a company to communities for no reason other than the fact that it's a community, that people exist, right? That you don't have to buy shares, you don't have to buy purchases or stocks in my company, that just the mere fact that there is a circulation of money happening between myself, my company, and my community, that profit can be redistributed to people, and that there's no reason why I have to do it other than the fact that I can just do it, other than the fact that people just deserve to live a good quality of life, and there doesn't have to be some type of deep altruistic self-gratifying philosophy of like, oh, I'm such a good person because I'm doing these things. That this should just be a given in an economic system, that wealth should be distributed so that people can all partake in a good and prosperous life. That was one of the ideas. I haven't been able to really properly invest in that idea because I have competing projects that I'm working on. But that's what I am going to need your guys' help on, is I need to know ideas, solutions on how to prove this individual wrong. I need to be able to prove this individual wrong because he watches all my stuff, we keep in contact, and he is on a life path where he is furthering, he's using the billions of dollars that his family has and that he is generating to worsen wealth inequality in America, to do more evil in the world. He's using exploited labor in other countries. He's investing in companies that are going to worsen the quality of life for Americans by extracting as much money from them as possible. And I don't have the answer to him. I don't have a competing good to tell him, look, here is the example of a successful experiment project, enterprise, economic system that proves to you that your way of doing things is wrong and that there is a possibility for people to collectively do good and to make that good a lasting impact. I don't have it. And I am one person. I cannot think of these things on my own. I need other people to help me figure this out. So that's my action item from you on this channel, is that I want you guys to help me think of the ideas, to think of the solution, because I focus a lot on the professional hating of evil side on my channel, but we haven't done a lot of development into the optimistic thinking for good. Like, what is the solution then? What do we have to offer, right? If all the ultra elites have chosen to gone down a path of evil, who is going to offer them good? Who is going to say that the good is actually doing better than the evil? Because every person who is evil is doing better than every person who is trying to live well, who is trying to stick to moral principles. People who are willing to step on others for their self-advancement and gain are marginally doing better from a material standpoint than those who have a commitment to good. But anyways, that's the end of the video. I'll see you in the next one.